So Tracy, I'm going to turn things over to you first. I'd love just for you to share some opening remarks, a little bit about your career journey to date, and just some thoughts in general about leadership, particularly with uncertainty.
Okay, great. Thanks, Trevor. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and you and your families are coping during this this crazy time that we've been living with the last couple of months. So I started my career almost 26 years ago with, and that whole time has been with various forms of Intact Financial. I started with a company called Guardian Insurance way back when, and in their trainee program. And I spent some time there right out of university in personal lines, commercial lines, as well as in claims. And in my early days, I also carried on my formal learning through the Institute and achieved what was back then called my AIIC. So I'm dating myself for sure. So now the CIP and then my fellowship back within the first few years of joining the industry. The first 12 or 13 years of my career, I spent it in various forms of broker-facing, a lot of it frontline management. I got into a leadership role quite early on in my career, and I spent a lot of time working on the front lines, working directly with the brokers in a couple of the Intact offices. And then I went on to work in our corporate office, spending some time in corporate personal lines, where I was responsible for things like rate filings, underwriting guidelines, new product development, that sort of thing for Ontario and the Atlantic. Through that, there's been, of course, a few acquisitions and worked on those. I spent then some time working with Jevco and Nordic, who is the facility association, as Intact is a servicing carrier, so got to understand that side of the business, which was a little different than your traditional P&C, as well as spending some time with Novex, which is our personal lines group company. From there, I moved into corporate commercial lines underwriting. So similar to what I was doing in personal lines, but also taking on the loss prevention aspect. So that was an interesting move to make in my career. And then about a year ago, I moved over to BrokerLink and in my current role. And so it's been a real interesting career. I think not too often people nowadays are not in the same company that they were in when they started. So 26 years with an organization now is a bit unusual, I would say, but the company continued to grow and change, and there was always lots of opportunity. And so I feel very fortunate that I've been able to take advantage of that and really gain some interesting perspectives, having seen the industry from a whole lot of different angles. And having been in a leadership role for much of that 26 years, probably 22 of the 26 years in some form of leadership. So a lot of interesting things. I've never been the most technical person on any team that I've been a leader or a manager of. And I think that can be a good thing, because it forces you to really build a great team around you and to trust those folks that you're working with, because you don't have to know everything and be the expert in everything to be a good leader of the team. So I'll leave it at that as a brief intro to get us started.
That's great. And Tracy, a couple of things really leapt out at me. I think that you embody sort of that squiggly line career as opposed to that linear trajectory.
Exactly.
That we hear so much about in the insurance industry. And I think it's also really heartening for all of the professionals on the line today who may be earlier in their tenure to recognize that, that there's a above average potential for leadership to be recognized early in your career, and that if you're doing really great work, if you're good with people, if you have sort of that propensity and that's where your career wants to go, there are ways that you can seize that and demonstrate that and capitalize on it so that it's exactly where your career heads. So
yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that perspective. Dave, we are going to turn things over to you. Would love to hear a little bit about your experience and some of the things that you've brought to the table. Tracy, I'm going to invite you and I to mute while Dave's speaking, just so we avoid that echo.
Yep.
Trevor, and great to hear from you, Tracy. And welcome, everybody. And indeed, these are very uncertain times, which makes the topic very appropriate for today. And I hope you and your families are all doing well. I think when we talk about leading in uncertain times. And you can look at anybody's career, and we're in the industry of uncertainty. And the fact that the insurance industry is there to deal with uncertainty in people's lives. So probably no surprise that each of our careers are marked by milestones that reflect uncertainty in uncertain times. And I suspect my career is no different than that. And I'll just take you very quickly through a few of the milestones in my career. I'm much older than Tracy, so I've been in the industry for about 30 years now. And I joined Royal Sun Alliance in 1990. And when I say 1990, it doesn't sound like that long ago, but that's now 30 years ago. So it is indeed a while. If I look back in 1990, I started my career with Royal Sun Alliance in Calgary. And 1990, for those of you old enough to remember 1990, it certainly marked very unusual times. Interest rates, I had just finished graduating from university with a fairly sizable student loan. And interest rates in those days were anywhere from 13 to 15% on student loans. So a lot of uncertainty in terms of where I was going to take a career. I had a science degree, so there was even uncertainty around what does that look like. And like many people of my generation, we kind of fell into insurance. Didn't necessarily intend on getting into insurance, but in 1990, a job was a job, and you tended to grasp at anything that allowed you to have a reliable income and start a career. And certainly over the past 30 years, I've come to recognize and acknowledge that insurance is a fantastic career, brings a lot of stability. And I even look at the uncertain times that we're faced with today, and the fact that how many people do you know that are working in the insurance industry have lost their job during this period of time? So it's a very slim minority of the people, I would suggest, that are not working during these times. In fact, not only haven't lost their job, but they're still working. Long days, in fact, many people. So like I said, I started back in 1990 in Calgary, and I grew up on the commercial underwriting side of the business. I worked in the Calgary office, started as an underwriting assistant, moving on to the underwriter training program. Left Calgary at a time of additional uncertainty, which was the next start of a really hard market. I left in August of 2001. And those of you that follow any history, a month after I left Calgary and moved to Ottawa, again, still with Royal Sun Alliance, 1 month later, having moved my family to Ottawa, September 11th came along, September 11th, 2001. Talk about uncertainty and very challenging times. That changed everything. That changed everything for our industry. It changed everybody's perspective on life, and it certainly changed a number of things in our society in terms of how we cope with risk and how we manage risk. So I was in Ottawa for a year and a half, but because of the economic challenges that came post 9/11 and the stock market crash and economic uncertainty, we consolidated our Ontario operations. So I then led the Ontario commercial business for Royal Sun Alliance from about 2002 to 2004. After that, I took on a role as national marketing and sales leader, putting in a very specific sales culture, very specific marketing plan for the overall organization out of the Toronto head office. And then after that, I moved into a role leading Neuraxis, where we were investing in brokers. So then comes along 2009, and I decided to make another change in my career. And I thought I would stay with the same company for the rest of my career, but I was presented with a very interesting opportunity to actually come on board to, at that time, what was labeled as York Fire and Casualty, and an opportunity post the acquisition of York Fire by Le Capital from Kingsway to come on board and help reinvent the organization and completely revolutionize how we had done business as an organization. And talk about uncertain times. So 2008, 2009, you remember the last financial crisis was indeed 2008, 2009. So again, uncertain times marking a change in my career. But I've been with Unica since 2009. And given the past performance of the organization, we were dealing with nothing but uncertainty and needing to reinvent an organization that was in dire straits and needed complete transformation. I saw that as an absolute significant opportunity and a chance to really build on a business. So here I am today, and we've come a long ways in our journey as an organization and have thoroughly enjoyed building the type of team, the type of culture, the type of strategy, the type of organization to help us survive in tumultuous times and put our footprint in the marketplace and have some success in terms of profitability and growing our business. So that's a little bit of a high-level snapshot of my career.
Thanks so much for that, Dave. One thing that really, I guess, was important to me as I was listening to you speak was that the industry has weathered change and uncertainty before. It has had sort of that, big major world events kind of driving the way that we consider risk, the way that we consider organizations, the way that we look at our workforce. And so I think that gives us voices of experience and knowledge and sort of a done list, if you will, that we can draw on that can help inform and shape some of the decisions that we make along the way. And I think that that's just important to recognize about career as well. We've encountered problems, we've had challenges, we've had opportunities. And even though they may look very different in the reality that we're currently working in, the skills and the competencies that we've acquired along the way haven't left us. And so we're able to kind of approach each situation from that unique perspective. So thank you for that, and really looking forward to kind of diving in and just pulling up some questions and that I wanted to start with. And Dave, maybe I will start with you here. For you, what does good leadership look like? And how can it be demonstrated at any phase in somebody's career? So what can we be doing right now, maybe to showcase that leadership competency?
Thanks, Trevor. So I'll give you a couple of high-level thoughts on what I believe good leadership looks like. First and foremost, if you're a new leader, there's this tendency or perhaps this perceived need to not necessarily be yourself and to follow a mold or a pattern or what the experts tell you should be doing. But if there's one thing I've learned over the years, and it's more important in any role, it's important in any role, but absolutely essential when it comes to leadership, is to be yourself. And if you're not being yourself, people are going to see through you, and people will eventually not follow you, and people will fail to be inspired by what you're conveying and the messages you're having. So absolutely critical in my mind. And it's not just a situation around uncertain times, it's in any time. If you're genuine and being yourself, speaking from the heart, instilling passion in others, the only way to do that is to be yourself. I would also add onto the table that the number one way for leaders to connect with people and to be effective is through communication and engagement. And it's at all levels. It's at the macro level in terms of broadcasting message and describing vision, but it's at the individual level in terms of being genuine and engaging people one-on-one and face-to-face as frequently as possible. I once had a very wise person tell me that there's only two jobs that a leader has. And it's one, to define reality. And so that's whether that's talking about the realities of the organization or the realities of an individual, what the future needs to look like, what are the issues around the current state of the market or the state of the organization, what needs to be done, but being very transparent and absolutely defining reality. So that's the first thing that a leader absolutely needs to look like and carry out, is to define reality. And the second piece is to thank people. And if we're doing those two things properly, defining reality for individuals and organizations and thanking people, that's, in my opinion, 95% of that would be my take on really critical elements of being a leader.
Those are some really great perspectives, Dave. And I think one that really kind of leapt out at me is that importance of authentic leadership. Once had a mentor tell me that the defining moment for them as a leader came when a staff member said, today you became a leader worth following, right? And so meaning that the behavior that they exemplified, the tone that they set, the reality that they shaped and created inspired people to follow and inspired people to give 120% and to believe success was possible. So really appreciate that concept of authentic leadership. Tracy, your perspective, what does good leadership look like for you?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that that Dave was talking about. And one of the, for me, I recall leaving one role and moving into another, and someone said to me, "We really liked your approach because you were genuine and relatable." And I think that that was really key in that it wasn't anything I set out to do differently, but it was just being yourself. And so I completely agree with Dave's points on that. So I'll try to take a little bit of a different, add a few other different things in than from what Dave touched on. I think that good leadership is about remaining positive, looking for solutions in things, and admitting when you don't know something. Just because you're the leader, you don't have to know everything. And in fact, I read a good quote recently, I saw it on LinkedIn, that said, your role as a leader is to bring out the best in others, even when they know more than you do. And I thought that that was really key, because to me, that's so important. You don't have to know everything to be the leader. You need to be there to be that big picture, to provide the guidance and direction to help people sort through some problems so that they can find their way to solutions. So I think that that's really key. I also think that you don't need to have the formal title to show leadership skills. So I always say to people who are interested in getting into a more formal leadership role, be a leader within amongst your peers. And that's the way that people are going to notice that you can be a leader in a more formal way. So I think that that's really important, to find those opportunities within your peer group. Be the person when there's a change that your team is facing, be the person that embraces that change, that rallies the rest of your colleagues together so that you all see why this change is important, what you need to do as a group to move forward. So I think that there's things you can do. I also think that sometimes people put a lot of weight on success coming from a formal leadership appointment. And I think that people can be leaders without necessarily having that formal title. So if I think about, on the broker side of things, and in an organization the size that BrokerLink is, we can have some really great leaders, our top salesperson, and those are people who model some really good behavior. They've got the positivity, they inspire and motivate others without formally being the leader. And I think that that's something that's important. A lot of people move into leadership roles because they feel like that's the definition of success, to formally have that role. And sometimes it's not always what people think it is. People, to me, a good leader is there for the right reasons. And that sounds a little bit cliche, like it's coming out of a reality TV show or something, but it's important to choose to go formally into leadership for the right reasons. It's a big responsibility. We often talk about how, and Dave talked about engagement, that the biggest driver of if someone's going to be engaged is the person that they're reporting to. So if you're not really committed to it, if you're not taking that responsibility, it can be tricky, and you won't get people to buy in. People won't follow you. People won't be inspired by you. So I think that to me, a leader is willing to admit that they don't know something, trusting the team around them, building up and developing, not being threatened by the good people on their team. In fact, helping build them up so that they can be, you should always be thinking about who could replace you, not I want to be irreplaceable. So to me, those are some of those things on top of everything that Dave mentioned that I think are really key to being a good leader.
Yeah, you mentioned positivity and sort of the solutions-focused approach. You zeroed in on being able to admit when you don't know the answer and trusting the team to be able to generate the solution by inspiring that kind of thought, and insight and input to give you all of the options available so that you can make the call and decision.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciated that you left to the fact that leadership comes in all forms and ways, that it's possible to model leadership at any point in your career path. What do you want to be known for and how do you live that out day to day? I think it's a really great kind of perspective for folks to have as they kind of shape and build and model their career.
Yeah, trust is another big piece of it, right? Your team has to trust you that you've got their back. but you have to trust them. And when there's that mutual trust, they won't be afraid to make a decision, because they know even if it's the wrong one, you'll help them figure out the right way. But if you don't have that mutual trust, then you paralyze the people around you from making decisions. You don't have to be the sole decision maker within the group.
No, it's about inspiring that, and as you alluded to, building that up in others and giving them the confidence to, be able to take their career, or to be able to take ownership of whatever project or piece that they're working on, and
Right.
and even build them up so that they have the confidence to take that to new heights. Dave also mentioned that construct of gratitude, right? And that respect, and that sort of your time, your commitment, your energy here is actually what helped us get to where we needed to go. And, showing that appreciation can all model what effective leadership looks like. And those are things that any of us can do,
absolutely.
And model throughout the process. I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are right now in the global pandemic. And Tracy, from your perspective, how has the industry and your organization responded to COVID-19?
So it's, as Dave said, we're here about helping people, depending on whatever is they're dealing with. And typically we think of that from the claims perspective, and their house has burnt down, or they've been in a car accident. We focused a lot, and we're hearing from our CEO at Intact Financial every day about really being focused on the people aspect of it. So certainly we've seen a lot out in the industry about premium relief, helping those who are having, dealing with that sort of side of things, delaying payments for people who may be out of work, or businesses that have had to close their doors. So that's certainly one very tangible way that the industry is helping. I think what's really key for us, and certainly coming from the broker side of things, we're trying to make sure we're focused on really good conversations with our customers about coverages, because in the early days we had a lot of people who were saying, take all the coverages off my car, I'm not driving it. And we're like, well, that may not be the best way to do it. Let's look at other ways we can help you out before you remove coverages. Or businesses that have had to shut their doors, you don't want to remove all the coverages. You could need those coverages. So let's think about other ways we can work together to help you. So I think that there's that side of it. But there's also the donations in terms of time or dollars that the industry is putting forward. So supporting things like food banks and Meals on Wheels and some other things like that, that the industry always rallies around that sort of thing. When there is natural disasters and things like that, the industry puts a lot of that effort into it. So I think that that's no different this time around. We're trying to be very, we from our side of things, trying to be very focused on, especially as leaders, staying calm through it. I think people have settled into a bit of a calm now. In the early days, it was like, what is happening? This is so surreal. Is this really going on? Is the world really all moving to their homes and no one's going out? But it's staying fact-based as well. There's so much out there, especially these days on the internet, where you hear rumors about this thing and that thing. And, that was really important in from a leadership perspective, was to stay calm, but to stick to the facts. And certainly in the early days, we saw a lot of people circulating, if you stand up and twirl around 3 times and drink your water backwards, you won't get COVID, and all this crazy stuff that was out there. And there was a lot of unknowns, and we're going to face that. And so it's sticking to the facts and making sure that when we're making decisions, they're based on what we know, based on credible information, and not just everything that's out there. So I think that those are some of those things, and those are conversations we've had as leaders within our organization with all of our employees, but also I'd say with our frontline folks who are talking to our customers, is remaining, calm, fact-based, and really trying to come up with solutions to help them out as best as we can, and really being focused on that. And it's going to be, it's going to be a hard hit to the industry for sure, but it's the right thing to do.
And so what I'm hearing from you, like really at this point in time, the industry needed to respond from all of the tools that it has available to it to be able to support our customers when they need us the most, to become that trusted advisor and really step up and demonstrate why we're the experts in this business,
Right.
and in ways that we're able to help and, you know, lend that subject matter expertise, so that we can make informed and wise choices. And the other, I think, that I really took away was, you know, the human element. Making sure that people, both on the job, within our customer base, that they know that we're dealing in fact, that we're dealing in reality, that we've got their backs, and that we're also trying to do everything we can to propagate a culture of you know, fact-driven decision-making, really strong sort of engagement and culture, and recognizing that we're here to help one another. So
Exactly.
I think that's all really great stuff to bring to the table. Dave, what about your perspective here? What are some things that you're seeing from a trend within the industry, and anything that maybe might be unique or different from what Tracy brought to the table?
Thanks, Trevor and Tracy. Yeah, and not to repeat what Tracy had laid out, but certainly a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of what we've exercised as an organization is the usual things related to helping customers, whether that's premium relief or payment deferrals or what have you. So maybe I won't spend too much time on the customer, but just talk a little bit about our staff. And because I'm a big believer that a big part of our responsibility as leaders is that if we're doing right by our staff and making sure that they're being looked after and taken care of and getting good communication, that suddenly the staff are much better equipped to take care of the customer. So if we're doing the right thing for our staff, they will in fact look after the customer. And so we're focusing a lot of our effort beyond the things like premium relief and what have you, but what are the right things to do for our people so that they can in turn be best equipped to service customers who still are having claims, or customers that require flexibility or coverage changes or premium relief or what have you. And I'm a huge believer, and it's especially embedded into our culture as a mutual, is that today matters. So what we do today matters for our future. And if we're doing our part as an organization through this pandemic and through these uncertain times to equip our staff to have success as individuals, but also as an organization to best serve our customers, then long-term, that's going to serve us well. And long-term, that's going to look good on our industry and build a brand as an industry. And I think it's something that we all acknowledge and admit that our industry always struggles to have a positive brand. It's a challenge whether we're recruiting great people or having customers speak highly of us, or industry colleagues thinking of our organizations as well-run businesses and strong brands. It's something that the insurance industry has always struggled with, is to build a good brand. And that's despite all the great things we do as an industry and how we enable the economy, and how we, even in these uncertain times, allow the economy to continue and provide a critical linchpin to ensuring that the economy survives post-pandemic. So I think the more we can demonstrate what we bring to the table as organizations and as an industry, the better chance we're going to have to come out the other end of this pandemic as a critical benefactor, for lack of better words, but a critical piece to allowing society to continue as much as normal as possible. And again, because what we do today matters for the future, and I'm convinced that the average consumer, the public, automatically believes that the industry should be sacrificing and automatically giving up premiums and what have you. We're probably one of the few industries that is actually expected to give up significant amounts of revenue and what have you to do our part for society. But I would suggest that overall what I'm seeing is we are as an industry, and we are putting proper measures in place to really help society and help people and exercise flexibility. And that, despite being a very regulated business, we are still doing significant things to help consumers. But fundamentally, what I truly believe is that if we do right by our team, right by our staff, treat them well, give them the tools that they need, give them the support that they need, they in turn are going to pass that on and help customers that are in need and do the right thing for society.
Yeah, Dave, I think you've hit a couple of nails on the head, is that there needs to be that outward brand building focus in terms of ways that we can show that we're doing right by consumers and that we're also helping them kind of weather the storm, if you will, but also looking inwardly and what kind of employer brand are we building and having put on the table in terms of the culture and the ways that we're supporting our people, the ways that the humanity of sort of what we do and the relationships that they're building. The world hasn't stopped for some other disasters. You know, there is flooding in Fort Mac. There is auto accidents still continuing to happen. Fires are actually up because more people are at home and unsure about how to maybe manage that meal preparation piece, right? So I think insurance has needed to step up in a variety of ways and to demonstrate that we're both corporately responsible, but also responsible to our people and to ultimately our consumers. So some great perspective there, which actually kind of leads into really nicely actually, into my next question, which is taking a look at the role that we can all play. So ourselves as individuals and professionals within the organization, how can we support effective leadership, building the right alliances, fostering engagement within our organizations as we move into recovery? So we're starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel. What are some of the things that we can be doing to drive that forward as an industry? I'll open that up to maybe Tracy first.
Sure, thanks, Trevor. I think that when it comes to the role we can play, to me, everyone has to do their part, and it's everyone taking accountability for it. To me, this isn't just a senior leadership thing. It's everyone in an organization plays their part in the support of building those alliances, the engagement in the organization, moving back to recovery. So that's things like embracing change. Things are different now than they were, you know, a couple of months ago. When I look at how many organizations within insurance, whether it was on the carrier side or the broker side, how many had this many people working from home? It was, you know, we're an old industry where it was like, we can't do our jobs at home. We have to be there in person. We have to see each other. And I think we've shown that that it can work. It's not perfect, and there's some things, bumpy parts we've got to work out. But I think as we move back into recovery, things are going to look different. And certainly at the highest levels of organizations, we have to embrace the fact that we can let people work from home, as one example, and get the job done. We may have to work out some technical stuff and all of that, but I think that can work. So we should all embrace the changes that come with it. We should ask questions. We should use this time to say, well, maybe things that we always did, we can do them differently. We've just shown we can do them differently in this time. So it's questioning how we've always done things. Do we always have to do it this way because we've just shown over the last few weeks we could do them a different way, and actually it was better and more efficient? So I think as we move back into recovery, like, we've seen all kinds of industries pivot and do things differently over the last couple of months, right? Restaurants that were dine in have become takeout places. You know, curbside pickup is now a thing that it really wasn't a thing a few months ago, right? So I think as we start to go back into recovery, it's really embracing that things will be different. We'll have to find ways to connect virtually. You're not always going to have that sit down face-to-face discussion with your boss or with your colleague, where you used to like pop up from your desk and talk over the wall of your cubicle to banter about a risk that's come across your desk. Finding other ways to connect and doing those things, you know, chat messaging and video conferencing and all of those things. So I think that that's going to be really key. Dave talked about it earlier, you know, engaging people. A lot of it is about communication. Like, you can't over communicate. You can't assume, especially as we're all virtual, whether it's within our own organizations, whether it's companies and brokers, whether it's brokers and customers. It's figuring out that communication piece and making sure, checking in for clarity, and that engagement. And to me, engagement is always a two-way street. No one makes you engaged It's not a manager's role to make you engage. There's things the manager can do to support that and the organization can do to support it, but we all play a part in our own engagement, in our own role that we play in our organizations at normal times. But as we move back into this recovery, I think that there are some, a key piece for all of us to play in moving forward and thinking about our business differently. People always joke that insurance is an old industry and it takes us a while to come around and adapt to changes. This is going to push us forward in a lot of ways, whether it's digital, online transactions, and working from home. Those are two key things that I think this has moved us forward years, and that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. I think that the industry was on a trajectory where technology was going to be disruptive. I think we've accelerated that timeline significantly. You talked about the authenticity piece again, the people piece, that your career isn't something that's being done to you. You can choose to innovate. You can choose to engage. You can choose to tackle the reality and the challenge in interesting and innovative ways. I think that that's great perspective. Dave, what would you like to offer in terms of what can we all be doing right now in terms of building those effective relationships and taking it to that next level as we move into recovery?
Thanks, Trevor. I'll add a couple of things to what Tracy said, but she pretty much covered a really nice gamut of what we can be doing. I think fundamentally, what leaders can be doing in this day and age, especially given the fact that the paradigm of our business has fundamentally shifted. And as Tracy said, this pandemic has forced new thinking. It's forced a new way of doing business. And I suspect as an industry and as organizations, we have learned a tremendous amount during this time. And it's really forcing us to think of things in a different way. So I would suggest as leaders, the number one thing we can do is give our teams, our staff, and our leaders, give them permission to be bold. Give them permission to take risks. Give them permission to continue challenging the paradigm. Leverage what we've learned out of this pandemic in terms of the technology use, how we communicate, how we engage people. Let's shake it up and try new things. If there's one thing that this did, it really did force the shift, and it forced a new way of doing things. And if I look at work at home, we always thought of work at home as it's that balance between efficiency, but giving people work-life balance. But we also know now that what a great way to be equipped to deal with business continuity. What a great way to fundamentally change culture to treating people more like professionals. So people don't need to be in the office and under somebody's thumb and under somebody's direct supervision to perform. So if you've got the right people and give them the right tools and let them act as professionals to deliver value to customers and teammates and other key stakeholders, people will surprise us in terms of they will perform and they will rise to that occasion. So I think it's really about giving leaders and ourselves permission to be bold, try new things, learn what we can from this pandemic, and to really challenge and change the paradigm in terms of how we run our organizations and how we deliver value in the industry.
Great, thanks, Dave. There's a thought leader who I ascribe to. Her name's Lisa Taylor. She wrote a book called The Talent Revolution, and she encourages leaders to take a scientific approach, to test hypotheses, to not be afraid to experiment and try something new, and to let your staff, control the variables a little bit and see kind of what kind of bubbles to the surface and what ultimately becomes a great idea or great innovation, while continuing to trust and give people the opportunity to drive people forward. I'm going to invite folks to throw some questions into the chat box as I invite the leaders who have joined us today just to share their one perspective that they wish their earlier career self had known. So one piece of advice that you'd offer to your early career self. And while they're answering that, please feel free to insert some of the other questions that you've got, burning questions or key takeaways that you wanted from the session, and I'll be sure to get to them before we wrap up today. Dave, if you wanted to maybe continue, that would be great.
Perfect, thanks, Trevor. So the one thing that I would tell my earlier career self would really be about don't shy away from the tough conversations. And to, like I said at the beginning, it's important that we be ourselves, because that's the only way to lead, is to be ourselves. But also don't shy away from the challenging discussions. And again, it goes under the theme that I was talking about earlier around defining reality and thanking people. Avoiding challenging conversations about individuals' performance or where the organization needs to go, or what our vision is and why we need to change our business, why we need to challenge the current paradigm of how we do business, why we need to embrace technology to allow us to do more work at home, why we need to treat people like professionals. All of these things that we need to do in order to be successful as an organization. I would have told myself a lot earlier in my career to have those conversations and to challenge the status quo. And it's not about being rude and disrespectful and forceful. It's about being kind, yes, but it's about being transparent and bold and saying things that will allow the organization and the people within that organization to thrive and to overcome challenges and to embrace new opportunities. So I think fundamentally it's all about not shying away from challenging conversations, tough conversations. Be confident in that, have the discussions, but do it with humility and do it with compassion and do it with empathy. Those three things will steer you in the right direction of how bold you can be on your conversations.
You're on mute, Trevor. Oh, there.
We go. Sorry. Thanks so much for sharing that, Dave. That's some really great perspective. I really appreciate that. Tracy, what's one thing that you would tell your earlier career self?
I think I got some really good advice in the early days, which I really took to heart, which has certainly helped my career, which was, volunteer, get involved, take initiative to get involved in projects, or keep learning new things that you may not necessarily think was that straight line. So you referenced earlier my career taking sort of that squiggly path. And so I early on, I had a few different folks and was very fortunate to work with some great people who really encouraged me to get involved in different things. Don't be afraid to take on roles that you may not feel 100% ready for. And I think a lot of people, and we spent a lot of time talking about diversity, and I think a lot of women in particular wait till they're 110% ready for something, and men tend to, and this is general, it's not every person, but they tend to think, well, I'm probably 75 or 80% of the way there, I'll go for it. And a lot of women tend to wait till the right time. My kids are still too little, and there's a lot that goes into it. So I think from a female perspective, just saying that don't let some of those things hold you back. You don't have to be 100% ready. You have to know what you don't know going into a role, and trust those that are entrusting you to take on a role. I've been given opportunities where I sort of went, oh, I don't know that I'm ready to take that on. But if you stop and go, well, but if they think I'm ready to do it, then I'm ready to do it, and I'll learn the other pieces that I'm not quite there yet, or I know who to go to help me out with those pieces that I don't quite understand yet. So those are some pieces of advice that I did get early on that I think were quite helpful in me and my career moving forward.
So I think the key sort of theme that I'm hearing from both of you is having trust in yourself, trust in those around you, and trusting the process, right? Recognizing that your career isn't something that's being done to you, but it's how to kind of, I guess, making sure that it feels like more that it's something that you are in control of and that others are influencing and helping you shape along the way.
If you wait until someone brings you a new role or the next opportunity on a silver platter, that's not going to happen. You have to take that ownership and figure out how do you develop yourself to create those opportunities for you. You may get lucky and some come to you, but you do have to take that ownership and that initiative for yourself, for sure.
I'm seeing a couple of things in the chat box, and one actually from Dave just saying, that how impressed he is by how many people have chosen to take part in today's session, benefiting from the expertise and insights of others, coming together as a community of practice, building out sort of your living library, if you will, that you can draw on and fostering those connections. Great way to be able to demonstrate leadership at any point. One comment that was offered that perspective is, seizing opportunity, knowing that it's important to, grab that brass ring to reach for sort of your ultimate goals, and having clarity about what those goals may look like, and knowing that they might shift and change as your career evolves along the way. Another question that just sort of came from the floor was some tips to grow and retain leaders in the insurance industry. You have the chance to work with a number of emerging leaders in both of your roles. Dave, what do you think is important in terms of growing and retaining leaders within the insurance industry, particularly right now?
Thanks, Trevor. A great question. And I would suggest it's the same tactics that you would employ to retain and grow leaders as you would to retain and grow staff of all types and all roles. And that is really involve them and push them and give them opportunity. I think we always believe that people aren't quite ready for something, or aren't quite ready for the next challenge, or aren't quite ready for this particular project. I think people will continue to surprise us and amaze us by their performance. And if we're hiring the right people and investing in them and training them and giving them opportunities and exposing them to new things and putting them on various projects, they're going to continue to amaze us, and they're going to continue to deliver better than expected results for the organization. So I think it's all about exposure and pushing the limit a little bit in terms of what we believe they're ready for, versus let's test it out and give them a try, and encourage them to take risk and to take on new opportunities and practice. So I think that's a big thing for me.
Absolutely. It sounds like to me that it's about trusting as well their readiness, right, and their assessment of sort of where they're at. And if they've been modeling solid foundations and good skills and competency, then it's likely that those can continue to be fostered with the right kind of relationship and mentoring, and giving them, I guess, the confidence to say yes to those kinds of opportunities. Building on that, Tracy, how would you recommend to someone to convince management to take a risk on them as a candidate when they want a bigger challenge or a more kind of diverse role?
Yeah, I would say that, and I agree, I think that we need to take more risks on people before waiting till somebody, to my earlier comment, is always 100% ready. And I think what you need to point to are things that they've done in their past that have demonstrated that they can take on challenging roles. So whether it was somebody who stepped up to, took the initiative to be involved in a particularly challenging project, or somebody who consistently is the one in the office when there's a challenging customer or claim or situation to deal with, they're the one that you go to that can help figure out, they can take a challenging situation, remain calm, think through, different solutions, different ways to approach things. So I think convincing someone to take a chance on giving someone a leadership role that may be a little bit more challenging for them is to demonstrate, show examples of when they've stepped up in the past. Because, it's really hard. You can say, oh, I think this person can take this on. I think, but what you really need to do is to show some real good examples of where they've stepped up in the past. And so anyone who wants to do that, you have to show people, don't hold back and wait. Show that you can take on some of these challenges.
My background is as a career counselor, and when we talk about competency, we often talk about evidence, right? And so it's about nomenclature, it's about providing specific examples, it's about articulating it in the context of the need within that department or organization that currently exists, and how that individual can fill it, right? And how they've stepped up and have the potential to really soar in that career path. I'm just going to open it up. Any other sort of burning questions or things that you'd like to know? I know we're pushing our time threshold, so want to respect that as well, but don't want you to leave today without having the chance to seize that opportunity and hear from these perspectives and voices of experience. As we kind of wrap up, I am going to put in a plug for our next session, which is a career roundtable focused on mission critical and some of the roles that have emerged as essential in the workplace and insurance industry in response to COVID-19. We'll be hearing from Aaron Gattoni, the VP of HR at CNA, Vinita Janwar, who is the president of TIWA, as well as a risk manager who's been dealing with some of the temporary structures that have been put into place as a result of COVID-19 response, and as well from Greg Markell from Ridgeway and cyber risk, and so we can hear from his perspective as well. So I just wanted to insert that link. It is in the chat box if you wish to register. Tracy and Dave, final thoughts, tips for success, what you want folks to leave with today. Please share those perspectives.
Like, do you want me to? I will field that one, and I'll be brief to let Tracy conclude. I'll give everybody the same advice that I try to give our team on a fairly regular basis. And I've always been a big believer that there's kind of three main things you can do to really advance your career and to be successful in an organization. The first one is always know your business's strategy. And if you don't know it, ask lots of questions. Find out as much as you can about where your organization is going. So that's the first piece. The second piece is understand your role. So talk to your leader about how can you as an individual help with that strategy and help execute that strategy. And again, have lots of dialogue and lots of discussion around how you can be helpful in terms of the organization achieving its goals. And then the last one is what both Tracy and Trevor have both alluded to earlier. It's invest in your career, invest in yourself. Your career is far too important to turn it over to somebody else. So be somewhat selfish. That's probably not the right word for it, but be proactive. Take control of your career, seek out opportunities, look for projects, be a champion of your own career in terms of seeking out opportunities to learn and take on new opportunities and new challenges so that you can be your best you in terms of execution of your company strategy.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, with everything Dave said. Two other things that I would add to that. I would say, regardless of where you're at in your career, be that positive solution provider or problem solver versus what I'd call a negative fault finder. Always be the one who's looking at things positively, proactively. How can we make things better? How do we get through this particular challenge we're facing? And I would say too, if you are aspiring to a leadership role, don't wait to be formally in that role to demonstrate leadership skills. Find ways to be an informal leader amongst your team and team members, but also know that if you aren't ever in a formal leadership role, it doesn't mean you can't be imparting some really great positive leadership skills and helping drive your organization forward.
Absolutely. Leadership can be shown anywhere, anytime. Those are some great perspectives and parting thoughts. On behalf of the Insurance Institute of Canada and our partners at Young Insurance Professionals of Toronto, Young Insurance Professionals of Ottawa, and Young Insurance Professionals of BC, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your expertise, and tips for success in the leadership space. I know you echoed so much of what I hoped would come out in the conversation today. And I know for many, just hearing that the industry's got this and that we are all in this together. We are weathering the face of uncertainty as a strong and united front and doing the best we can for our people, our customers, and the world around us. So thank you.